To order at 6:31. I'm going to acknowledge a great number of public people here. So,
Public people.
of the public, as opposed to private people. Maybe we'll just take a minute to go around and just say who's here. Just introduce yourselves with a name and
Who you're with.
who you're with, or with whom you are.
Brian, let me start with you. Yeah.
Brian Lewisell, Austin Design.
Okay?
And Tom Chalmers, Austin Design.
Okay?
RT Brown, BDCC.
Right.
Alex Beck,
Alex
BDCC.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Pasha, BDCC.
Caleb. Hi.
Jen Stromston, BDCC.
Steve Lemke, Floodplain Administrator.
Emily Davis, Wyndham Regional Commission.
Robert Buchan, myself, architect.
Okay?
Dave Dancos, All Seasons Construction.
And last week, we also need to recognize Ian Keel back from BCTP. Thank you so much for being here. Someplace circulating around the room with the sign-in sheet, there are the rules of the procedure for the meeting, which basically are, please keep to your allotted time, and please wait to be called on for comments and discussion. Are there new additions to the agenda for this evening?
Nothing I'm aware of.
Good, thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda order for this evening? Thank you. So let us launch right into approval of the minutes of our regular meeting of July 10th. Somebody like to move?
I move that the minutes be approved.
Anybody second?
I'll second it.
You'll second it. Okay, thank you, Veranda. Did we have people who were not here
I'm
last?
abstaining, so.
You weren't here.
Gordon was not here.
Gordon was not here. Any discussion, any comments?
I would just say with that non-unanimous vote, you should put who voted how in the meetings, in the minutes.
Oh, okay. Sure.
In all the motions?
Well, it's just one motion.
No, just the one motion, the
It
very
just said
first,
one
the
person
second
and-
one.
You know, it should say 3 did this, and it should be
Yep.
say the names of the people who voted how.
Okay.
Sure.
That's all.
Sure. So other than that,
I can amend that.
do we approve the minutes as amended?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, Miranda. Passed. So our first order of business is BDCC, and I don't think Kristen is here. You don't look like Kristen.
Sorry, unfortunately not. So as I mentioned, I'm Alex Beck. I'm the Workforce and Education Program Manager. You've heard a lot from me in the past about our workforce programs. Happy to say they are chugging along as usual. We had over 240 sophomores engaged in our high school career awareness program this year, of which Bellows Falls Union, Brattleboro Union, and Twin Valley were a part. And we're happy to say that Leland and Gray heard good things and they're signed up for the next year. Young Professionals Group continues to chug along. And we have our internship program that continues to place students nearby. So we're not here to talk about workforce today because there's a lot of other really exciting initiatives we're going to be talking about. But I, of course, wanted to show my face. I hope you all have our contact info, and if you have any workforce-related questions, this is just your prod to reach out to me any other time, or you can ask questions now, but to stick to our time, there are other more exciting things I think my colleagues can talk about.
So one question for you about
Of
the
course.
intern program. Were there any Guilford interns? Do you know, or can you say that? Because
I
I know
would-
at some point you have not been able to say whether or
So-
not specific.
Luckily, we will be wrapping up our short presentation with one of our interns who was born and raised in Guilford. So the answer is yes, and I don't feel bad about sharing it, but I think you're at the end.
Yeah,
so
the last word.
we're he's the anchor, so we'll get to
So you
him.
can talk,
Okay, I'll go fast. RT Brown, I wear 2 hats at the BDCC. I'm the Wyndham County Economic Development Programs Project Manager. That's taking the funds that were provided to the county due to the closure of the Vermont Yankee Power Plant and getting it out there for purposes of economic development. And it goes towards private industry for expansion purposes and other projects. But we've released the RFP for this year, for the 2017 RFP, and I'll be doing a webinar actually August 1st next week about the RFP and what the focus of this year's RFP is all about, which is actually workforce. The other hat I wear is relative to entrepreneurship and innovation. To touch on two aspects that are new developments in that area. We'll be launching a startup lab at the end of August. So for new businesses that are looking to really go from the idea stage to actual formation and get a business plan created, that's a cohort-driven model. So we'll help them through that process. It's a seven-week program. And then secondly, we will be introducing a rural, sorry, it's a mouthful, Rural Micro Entrepreneur Assistance Program, which is a revolving loan fund for small businesses. So businesses with 10 employees or less, loans up to $50,000 for businesses that have a hard time getting traditional financing at banks. So that, you know, that covers the gamut. It could be debt consolidation or what have you, but it's a program to really help those businesses sort of fill that gap as they work towards becoming, fundable through traditional means. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, I'm gonna cover a couple other things. I'm Jen Stromston. These aren't necessarily programs that I run, but I write a lot of the grants, so I tend to know the programs pretty well from that. So one of the things that's happening is we're gonna be doing a SEDS renewal, the regional plan that you all have done. That's why we come to town meeting, really, to ask you all to invest in that. So the renewal of that will involve Bennington as well as Windham counties. There's reasons for that have to do with sort of the scale at which basically the federal government wants to see us sort of planning the level of multi-county. So that's going to be hopefully funded by the fall, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that. Last time the SEDS was done, there were 55 community meetings, so there'll be in kind of a doubly that once we go to the 2-county level, so there'll be a lot of engagement. All right, another 2-county initiative is SVEP, the Southern Vermont Economy Project, which is basically sort of a capacity building thing. It has a bunch of partners, but we're not limiting the events to those partners. And so it's helping, frankly, we've been sort of doing a bunch of things over the past year and learning what is needed, and then there's a lot of stuff that we've been asked to just help like towns and local chambers and local organizations do things like learn how to do more grant writing, learn how to sort of use some of the tools. People come around and say, are these all these tools that you can use to do projects? And that's not enough. Like sort of getting a little more into the nitty gritty of training local organizations about how to access external resources and funding. And so that's the direction that's been going in, sort of a bi-monthly webinar series. And then I think that you're gonna hear later about the Living Community Challenge. That's part of the Ecovation Hub project that we work on sort of for county. And so that's ongoing. Something the Living Community Challenge is a piece of it, but there are 4 other initiatives building out of that right now. Anyway, leave time for Caleb, who's our amazing intern who has more data about you. So.
Hi, so as Jen mentioned, my name is Caleb Pasha. I'm 19, I'm a college student. I just finished my first year at Buchan University in Pennsylvania. And well, I live right up on Stage Road, so about 5 minutes from here. And this summer I've been working at the BDCC as a summer intern through the internship program. And that was kind of an opportunity that really appealed for me because I wanted to be at home around the area with my family, but also kind of get some experience in a professional environment that was appealing to my academic interests. I'm in economics. I'm double major in economics and political science. So the BDCC was a really great opportunity for me, and it's been really cool this summer to see kind of all the work that this organization does. And I know, at least for me, at the beginning, I wasn't entirely sure of what all of that was, but I think. And
now you have a really full picture.
Yeah.
And we don't want to believe.
But yeah, I think it's been really great to see kind of all the work that this organization does in this region, and how, I guess really how important it is that the towns in this region are connected to one another. I guess I experienced that myself. I mean, when I was growing up, I've lived in Guilford since I was 2, but I did a lot, I played a lot of sports and stuff like that. And all that was in Brattleboro.
Can people speak up a little bit, because I'm having trouble hearing in the mountains on my dinky cell phone.
I apologize. I'll try and be louder. but yeah, it's been really kind of eye-opening for me to see the work that the BDCC does in connecting places to each other, and how a region like this operates from an economic standpoint. And that's something, even though I've lived here, that you don't necessarily realize until you look at it and focus on it. So yeah, I think that the BDCC has been a really great opportunity for me.
And tell them what you did.
So some of the stuff I've been doing includes things like data gathering on a town level, which can be difficult, especially for a small place. The sheet that Jen just handed me was basically data I gathered about Guilford, so looking at demographics and population, as well as businesses and age cohorts and employment and stuff like that. And that's some of the work I've been doing in things like that and data gathering. Yeah, I think that's...
You know, Caleb, one of the things that's come up when we've heard about this is how does this impact Guilford more directly? You're obviously a perfect example because you've fulfilled an internship. But one of the things I'd love you to think about is how can we engage more younger people to utilize the resources that are offered. And, as you finish up your term, that would be something I think that the town of Guilford would be, very appreciative toward you if there's anything that you would recommend as a way to reach out to our younger population as ways to be taking advantage of all these resources.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it's hard. I know, I was really made aware of the opportunity because my dad talked to Alex. And then, I set up the internship after that, but I don't know if I would have been aware of the opportunity. So I do think, it's definitely a legitimate concern. I think it's something...
Well, we'd love to get the word out there
exactly.
more effectively.
We could also have you write an article for the Guilford Gazette as well.
There you go.
He's been writing press releases. He's a great writer. Among the other 100 things we can get doing.
That would be really helpful to get the word out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Great.
Steve?
It would also be cool if you dug into those data points and then published that, and down at the bottom it says Caleb Pasha, intern, Guilford resident. I think then there's a direct result of you being there, not just because you're there, but because it's something that said, well, I never knew that about Guilford. So if you could do those two things, I think that would be great.
So I still have a couple weeks left. So.
I think we still have a little bit of minute here. I wanted to say that over the last couple of years, I think we've grown in Guilford to respect and appreciate all the efforts of BDCC and to understand how we can interact more fully, what resources are available, and this kind of dovetails with, I think the select board as a whole agreed to look at the sustainable economic vitality of Guilford. And so this is definitely a contributing, your presence, your work is definitely a contributing aspect, and we're grateful for it. Thank you so much for it.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing
And
that.
Caleb, thank you. It's great to hear this, and we do look forward to seeing the data and getting an article from you. We can do that as well.
Well done.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Emily, I think you're on for Living Communities Challenge. Susan is not here.
Yes, Susan's not
So
here.
actually, if you come to the table,
Sure.
maybe sit there,
Yeah.
then Veranda would be able to hear you, and
That'd be great.
and she would be.
She'd appreciate it.
So Emily Davis from Living Communities Challenge, Wyndham Regional Council. Commission, sorry.
It's okay. So hi everybody. I have a couple just description printouts. I don't have, and that's enough for everyone. This is the most well-attended select board meeting. So
Oops, we just lost Miranda. Could you hold 1 minute, please, and we'll get her back.
But what I'm passing out is just one more. Okay.
That's okay, I gotta take notes, so.
No.
Thanks, though.
Okay, you're on
You're
again.
back again.
Oh, great. Okay, we got disconnected, I guess.
Great. So what I was just passing out was a description of what the Living Communities Challenge was. Basically, I know folks at BDCC are familiar with
Hello?
this. Hi. Hello.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I just need the people who aren't, the select board people I can hear very clearly, but anybody else is a little cloudy, so I'm sorry.
Okay, Veranda, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So the Living Communities Challenge was something that, it came from the Ecovation Hub, and the Wyndham Regional Commission was working, or has been working with Building Green and the communities in Algiers Village and community groups in Algiers Village to do this scoping and a visioning project for the Living Communities Challenge. So instead of really diving into, we are diving into some of the details of what the criteria are for the Living Communities Challenge and what that means. But I think right now we're sort of at that broader meta level of seeing whether or not this would be a good fit for Algiers Village and for the community groups there, and kind of doing a visioning process rather than, a master plan specifically. But theoretically, after this project, the Algiers Village and the community groups there and the community leaders there could take this towards a Living Communities master plan process. So I guess I'm here to just represent the project and to answer any questions, and Sheila can chime in here because we've been working together fairly closely on this. And I'll also add that we're at a point where we've had two meetings with the core, with the 4 core community groups.
Minimum.
Maybe
three.
I think it was 3. We've
Yeah.
had 3 meetings with the core partners. They were really great. We kind of looked at some of the strengths and weaknesses of Algiers Village. We looked at some of the criteria of the Living Communities Challenge and what that means and how we can start to work towards that. So staying at a feasibility level, but we're starting to dive into some schematic designs. But before we do, we wanted to broaden our reach and broaden the conversation, and so we're having our first community meeting on August 16th. Time and place, I think, are still to be determined.
The place is determined. It's at the church.
Oh, it is
at
at
the
the
Guilford
church.
Community Church.
Thank you. Yeah, so
in the evening.
sometime in the evening.
Yeah, we haven't
5:30
got it.
tentative.
Trying to figure the final times out, but maybe 5:30 to 7:30.
Yeah, it's just so that we can figure out the time that most folks can make it. And at that presentation, at that meeting, we'll have first part of it kind of talk about again some of the criteria and the meaning behind Living Communities Challenge, and then we're going to open it up to have it be more of a generative discussion of ideas and what the community envisions for Algiers Village.
So does this originate with a thought about a building, for instance, in Algiers, and then there's the connection between the challenge and the community and how the building and the community will exist together and be planned together? So there is a building that's at the origin, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Or an idea for a building.
It's actually buildings, plural. And one of the things that we're working on is really identifying where the boundaries are within Algiers Village, and that can be pretty freeform. But the thought is that it's sort of like, it's comparable to a LEED type certification that would be for a building in particular. The Living Communities Challenge is actually taking it at a master planning level where you can incorporate multiple buildings and multiple different sites and landscapes and natural features. So it is at that village scale. And that's really exciting and really interesting because you can sort of play on community strengths and find more collaboration within buildings. Not just on kind of, again, that more technical natural resources or utility use level, but also at a community scale where a community strengths. So that's a
maybe
very
and
fluffy
a
way
different
to
answer. A different way of answering your question would be that if you look at the groups that are involved, were initially involved in the initial sort of conceptualization and examination of possibilities and opportunities. It was Community Collaborative for Guilford, the Church, Friends of Algiers Village, and Guilford Preservation Inc.
Mm-hmm.
So those are 4 nonprofits located in our tiny little Algiers Village that all have missions that overlap, that are looking at this opportunity that was brought to our attention by Wyndham Regional Commission and Ecovation Hub, to see whether we can move out of silos and into community.
making it a village, or
Yeah.
facilitating it to become a
Or move
a
towards,
village.
not out of.
Yeah, and so, thank you, that kind of, I had a very abstract answer and Sheila
I love
wrote it down for
abstraction,
me.
though.
So we are kind of looking at the properties and the buildings that are incorporated and associated with those 4 nonprofits and other community centers and seeing how they can interact with each other.
Great, I got it.
It would be consistent with our town plan and community feedback, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think there's a concern maybe that there could be a perceived concern that sort of it's a buildup in downtown,
Mm-hmm.
right? Especially since we don't have any zoning that,
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly, and thank you for bringing that up. Early on in the process, I know Susan and I did go into the Guilford Town Plan and just pull out policies that would kind of serve as being sort of like the I-beams in the structure, that they are being informed by the town plan policies. And I will say too that I think one of the big impetuses, and actually in this packet are the actual letters of interest that were submitted to the Wyndham Regional Commission by the 4 Guilford nonprofits. And in it, they do cite that because of the lack of zoning, they do kind of want to be able to take community ownership of this place and be able to put, not control is too aggressive of a word, but to kind of, in a way, softly control the
Master
development of Algiers Village.
Aspirational master plan.
There you go, yeah.
And I think it could well have a spillover effect into the entire community of Guilford, and so that's why this meeting on August 16th is being convened, because it's not just Algiers Village. Algiers Village is part of Guilford and will be, so we want much more input, much more participation, feedback.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
How well is this being publicized that this is underway?
Thus far, it hasn't been publicized, I think, terribly. I wouldn't say it's not well.
Well, we
haven't
did
really-
report to the select board at the end of June.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
had a report to the select board about my engagement through Friends of Algiers Village, and that was on community TV, and it's in the minutes.
Yeah, I would say kind of within the community groups, I think it's being well understood. We haven't really taken it outside into in press releases or anything like that, just because it felt a little bit too early in the process.
Yeah,
Is that
it
a
is.
fair?
I would say until the larger
Yeah.
community gets engaged.
Yeah.
Also reporting to the planning commission.
Mm-hmm. And reporting to the plan commission, but I know that it's too early in the process, but I know that I think that eventually, once there are some more materials and publications that could be made as a result of the community meeting and as a result of some of the schematic designs and ideas, we could come up with some really beautiful publication material that can come in the form of press releases at the minimum. But I know that some folks at Tiny House Fest are really interested in this and interested to the outcome. I think for this year it's too early, but they would love to get, the conversation started with Guilford after that, of seeing, how can alternative styles of development and building be incorporated. It's not, a direct translation of tiny houses, but so that's just one example, but I think that there are opportunities, the community would decide what's appropriate for them, but to really have this shine as an example.
That's a wonderful
Yeah.
event to be going on, process to be going on in our town, I would say.
We're really excited.
And we really, as somebody who's participated in this from the beginning, based on another role I play, Emily and Susan McMahon have been great
Thank you.
guides through this process, bringing a lot to our attention and helping us through the process, so thank you.
That's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
And you should say, has anyone met the challenge yet?
The rural challenge, aren't we the first community?
That's what's also really, personally, I'm excited about this, and I think that this can be really exciting on a broader level, is that when you look right now at examples of communities that have met the challenge, they tend to be all urban, like almost exclusively urban. And that makes sense for a lot of reasons, because you have a lot of concentrated human and utility resources. But if Guilford were to pursue, Algiers Village were to pursue this master plan as a result of our vision planning work, it would be the first rural community. And I think that that's a really smart move in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And not just, the conversations on sustainability nationally, but also within Vermont, because I know that a lot of, right now, sustainability kind of looks like an urban setting, and I think that we could play with some really interesting concepts around how our rural communities and villages can work towards net zero systems and sustainability. So, yeah, I think it's great.
You just hit the deadline, the timeline. That was an awesome
Well done.
performance.
I'll stand there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I have copies of this and for the audience if anybody wants.
Thank you.
I don't know if you all want to leave, because the next few things are architectural discussions and fuel consumption.
All right.
So we'll give you a minute to exit gracefully. Austin.
Come back sometime.
Yeah.
Talk to you all.
So would you also like to come to the table, because I think it will be easier.
Jan, where's Jan?
They're also the ones who put on that municipal.
Yeah, and I want you to come and talk to us.
Yeah. Maybe you could sit over there, so your back will not be to the camera.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, these are the facts?
Yes, we will.
You can email them to Peter.
You can email them to me.
That'd be great, Caleb. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. My email address is on our website.
Yeah, I can do that.
So, we have Austin Design proposals here to discuss the RFP that we put out for considerations of what to do with all the issues with our town office. So it is 6:58. We have 20 minutes.
Should we get started?
Would you like to go ahead?
Okay.
Thank you, you're invited.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Brian Lewisall, this is Tom Chalmers, and thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We are excited to be here talking about modernizing this building, as well as working on improving accessibility issues and helping the town of Guilford improve its assets, which I think is probably the number one thing we can do for sustainability, is use the resources we have and make them better. So having an opportunity to speak with Peter about the project and coming for the walkthrough. Obviously, as you know, we saw lots of things that need improvement, which is why we're sitting here today. And Tom has a lot of experience working with towns and town halls, accessibility, and together with the production end of things, as well as the experience in public projects, as well as municipal buildings. I think we bring the experience and some good ideas to the table that we'd like to discuss with you.
Good.
Yeah. So,
Well, I think in the proposal we started making a list of some of the items, you might say, in scope of work, and what we and practically all we've done quite a bit of work for small towns, either acting town halls or some that have been town halls are now community centers and library, and all of them have big restrictions on budget. Is the number one item, and a lot of work to do. And I think where we start always is first getting to know the building, getting drawings of the building, and secondly meeting with all the occupants of the building, you guys, and trying to come up with a scope of work list, items that need to be done. And then once we have that list, we try to detail it, look at what the implications will be in terms of cost and construction, and then most importantly, try to prioritize which things are most important, because there's never enough money to do everything. Right. And it helps to have sort of an assessment and a schedule moving forward that distinguishes each item and the cost for each item, so that things can move around, and so that you can decide to do some things more than other things. The other key ingredient with that is to prioritize stuff in such a way that if at one point some work is done in one area and not done in another, that when you come back to, if at some later date you were to work on that other piece, you're not, interfering with work you've already done. I think one of the projects we worked on in the town hall in Brookfield it was a very large masonry building, and it had an immense number of things that really needed to be addressed, and very little budget. And so there we spent a lot of time coming up with very detailed list of items in different categories. So site, interior, accessibility, code required work, even mechanical work, and then took that and put it into try to prioritize which things really needed to be done first, and which things could. And so we had different phases, and they could all be done at the same time. But if funding came, if the funding was such that you couldn't, then you could do first phase and then move on to the second phase without, interfering with what had been done before.
And you had budgeted for each phase.
Yeah, we had cost estimates for each phase and description of the work, and then once at some point we can come up with a list that does all the things we need to do, and hopefully the money's there to do those things, and then we move on from that to develop the design, and then move on to construction documents, and then from there public bidding and construction. So I think I don't know if you've all had a chance to look at the proposal and not sure how much of that list that it's a very initial kind of task list, but I'm not sure how much of that is jives with what you're thinking, but I think probably one of the big one thing that is always early in the design process, you make the decisions that really determine the cost. So it's early on that really matters. It's not once you get going, you can tweak it a little bit, but you only nickel and diming things. It's sort of the big moves that make a difference. And I think here probably one of the biggest moves would be whether or not there's an addition or not. That would probably determine whether there's enough space in here to rearrange things in a way that work for you, or whether it needs to be added, it needs to be an addition to.
I think that my impression was your proposal was very well organized, kind of understood that we have no idea what we might have to spend, and that we would need to be looking at what we must do, what we'd like to do, whether we can phase things in over time, whether we have adequate sources of funds to cover the things that need to be done. And so we're kind of going at it like this, from where we might get funds and what we might need funds for. And I thought personally that your proposal addressed the process of trying to figure that out pretty clearly.
Yeah, and we're used to, the process takes a while. So, we're used to having time go by and, revisiting things, and, because it is an iterative thing between looking at what you want to do and then going back and trying to find money for that, and then seeing how that jives with it.
I don't remember any specific questions that I had. I'm just looking through this very quickly.
I have a question. So there was the question of whether you would be looking at, if you were chosen to be the contractors, our interest in using Guilford subcontractors.
Okay. So we wouldn't be doing the construction. We'd just be doing the design. So then it would, and once our documents are ready, then it would go out to bid, and basically anyone could bid on those. I don't think you can limit it to local contractors.
Yeah.
But very often I found that the local contractors tend to know the area, know the other contractors, know the building well, and they often come up with a lower price than people do. So you usually can kind of end up working with them anyway.
So you've talked about Brookfield. It might be helpful for the select board to understand if you've done other projects similar to this.
Yep. let's see, there was a small town hall, West Hampton Town Hall, we did some accessibility work for that. Included a ramp and a toilet room, and basically an assessment of.
Our immediate priorities.
The assessment of what was needed for that. And that was kind of a similar building, it was a house, residential scale building. The Adams Library is a different kind of building, but it was a similar, it was an accessibility review for that building. And basically, that was more kind of repairs and redoing an entrance. We're now doing construction on the Berlin, it's actually not, it's called the 1870 Town Hall. It's not actively the town hall anymore, but it's used as a community building.
What do you, when you say you're doing construction?
Okay, so we finished the construction documents and it went out to bid. Yeah, we're not actually constructing.
Okay, sorry.
Take credit for design. Try to take credit for everything. No, we are facilitating, we're managing not actually managing, we're observing the construction process is the technical term, to see that it conforms to the documents that we drew. And that one is basically, it's an addition to provide an elevator access from the grade to the second floor. So there's a lobby and an elevator on that.
Hitchcock and Buchan.
Williamsburg Town Hall was an old building that we did a phase study for. They ended up, right now it's sort of occupied holding their historic artifacts for the town instead of a history museum. It's used very seldom, and they ended up just doing phase one, which was a structural stabilization to the building to really get it weatherproof and make sure it wasn't gonna, it was a few years ago.
So when you had your, fee for services for the conventional project, you have it, I'm thinking that the way it lines up is that if the projected construction cost was 200,000, your fees would be, this is on page what?
It was roughly 8%.
$16,800, and if it was at the $500,000 level, the fees would be at $23,000.
Right,
Is that?
it's a percentage, right.
Okay, thank you.
And basically, that reflects the size of the job reflects the amount of work we have to do. Basically.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's with, the 8% is with us carrying the consultants, so whatever we pay the consultants.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Anybody else have other questions or comments?
I thought it was a very well articulated thing.
Yeah.
I brought a copy of the beginning of the Brookfield study if that's of any interest to anybody.
Sure.
I would love to see a hard copy. I didn't take the time to copy it
Is this
out.
for us?
Yeah, you can keep that.
Why
That's
don't you
just
see
a copy of doesn't include all the drawings and all the other stuff, but it's basically how the phases work.
Okay. Any questions you'd like to ask us? Anything you think we didn't raise in the process?
I think it's not necessarily a question to answer tonight, but it was unclear to me as to what the plans were to continue work as a town office during construction, and that's something
That's a good question.
to consider.
That's always a question.
Whether that's a mobile office or another building that you can use temporarily.
Sheila's house.
Once the bridge is opened.
You definitely can get a better price for construction if they can just come in and do the whole thing at once and not have to move around people.
No, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
And as Tom said, really the last thing you want to do is have to undo work that
Right.
you just did. So.
Hi, this is Veranda.
Hi, Vern.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you for
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very
taking
much.
the
Thank you
time
very
to
much.
come here
Thanks for having
tonight.
us.
I
Thanks for
really
your
appreciate
time.
it. Thank you for bringing the thing on the Brookfield.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
All right.
And I think it will be at least 2 more, August,
No.
when is our next meeting? August 14th?
Well, we originally told them the earliest that you would potentially make a decision is the end of August.
Yeah, and it seems like it's
20
still,
days.
Oh, yeah, right.
we're still at that point.
Okay.
It's just,
Well, if you have any more questions in the
We
meantime,
will.
feel free to reach out.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you.
coming
Appreciate
by.
you guys coming.
Thanks,
you.
guys.
And I just realized that I was referring to the Robert Buchan
I
That's right.
thought that,
Um,
I thought those numbers
figures,
sounded very
not
familiar.
theirs, and I apologize for that. I was in the wrong.
I was just
book.
rummaging through my pink files.
Yes,
and
no.
I know those
I'm
numbers.
sure it's like that. When you said 200 and
Yo,
500,
I totally apologize for that.
Anyhow, here we are.
You were quite polite sitting back there.
Right, so I'm Robert, and Dan, it's
Dave.
Dave.
Don't worry, everybody
I'm
knows it.
spoonerising before I've even got started. Dave,
I've got
from,
your card.
I don't think I had cards printed before, but we're up to date now.
Okay.
Just pass them around.
So
Thank
we
you.
both come because when we picked up the, are we online? Is-
Miranda, I don't think we've got her
Miranda
back.
here?
Lost her.
Should I stop until she reappears?
Just one moment, please.
Hi, this is Miranda.
She said there was spotty connection
Yeah.
there, so.
I think we should proceed, and if she can join us, she'll probably call us. in.
So when we first got the RFP, it seemed very much as if there was a rush to get everything done.
Always.
You had a certain number of weeks to get everything accomplished, and we started getting a notion about budget. The more we've continued talking, we came to see Peter, we walked through, we watched the video of the last meeting, and the more we looked at it, the more it became a question as to whether, in fact, a really big priority is certainty about budget and a really good, transparent decision-making process to get to the project. And as we thought more and more about that, it would appear that the design-build model of project delivery is probably what you need to get you the really good price, known well in advance, and also ways of making clear how decisions are made all the way through, so that as we start on the big moves of the project, Dave is working with real numbers rather than price book numbers to get us our budget as we go. Just looking at the building as a whole, there are some things wrong with the building. There are several things that need urgent attention. There are some things that need maybe attention. We categorise them mentally into three kinds of things. There's many small items like every doorknob should be a lever handle to comply with ADA. Stain on the ceiling, this and that, which there's one way to fix those. They're easily listed, tabulated. We can get that price done. There are other things where there is choice. The roof would be one of the big moves. Do you want to go for a 50-year standing seam metal roof? Do you want to go for an asphalt shingle roof because perhaps the building was built at one point, then the addition was built, and now we're remodelling, and maybe in another 20 years it'll be time for the next project, so it makes sense to do it that way. There are these questions to way up as we go along. And then there is a kind of unknown. We know that there are things in the planning of the building and in the access through with the front door and the handicap ramp, which don't work and need a major readjustment. But until we do that task of talking to everybody who works here and finding out how the place is meant to work, we can't quite say what that's going to be. So there's an unknown there. It leads us to say, well, we can keep the simple things simple. If, for example, the heating system, if it's just to be fixed up, maybe the best thing is to bring in a really good heating contractor who can work out what to do with that system. Does it need the boiler replacing? Does it just need a new jet? Or do we have to change the lot out? If, on the other hand, in the big picture question, you decide to go from the Living Community Challenge to the Living Building Challenge and start doing these things, then yes.
Dave's our man. Dave's our man.
Well, Dave is our man to do the numbers, but Klaus Bartenstein and his buddy Dan Duprus are the guys to come in and calculate the whole lot, do an energy model, make it work for you.
Were you planted here, Emily, for this?
But I need your card. When it comes to making the project work, we've come up with a kind of methodology for how to go through each stage of things, and that's all laid out in our proposal there. I am going to send you a completely different schedule though, because the schedule that was in it was based on us having been told last meeting that we could go ahead.
Go ahead.
To get started on the project. But the decision, well, in the RFP, it said that the decision would be made, actually no, it said it was going to be made today.
No, it's been the end of August all along.
Oh, well, I misunderstood. So I wrote the initial suggested program, assuming we were going to get started on the project if we were successful, pretty much about now.
Oh, in June.
And then,
July.
so there's a little dotted rectangle in July. Well, that's dotted because it's not there. What's going to make most sense is to work methodically through everything, get working on grants, prepare towards doing the actual site work next spring, start, and then when next summer comes round, if you can borrow space in the school or plant a porta cabin on the school lawn, evacuate, let Dave have this building, get it done. So that's the suggestion at the moment. I understand that Isaac Wagner's been helping some people in town with grant applications for some things. I don't know if he's done a good job for you.
He is a consultant, right?
Yeah. I've worked on a project where he has done that sort of stuff, and he's been great at putting the money in, getting the grants organised. Having a consultant like that who is familiar with all those processes is one of the most important things when it comes to getting the documentation right, because every kind of grant requires a different kind of documentation to prove that you've complied with the accountability requirements. And some of them I know, like historic is really obvious, everything has to match. Some of the others, the USDA things, certain things have to be bid, recorded certain ways. We've done those one way or other. The gentleman who worked on the Springfield Parent-Child Centre, which Dave's firm built and I wrote the specification for, he's from Brattleboro way too, Tom Apple. He's very good at those things. As long as there's someone like that involved, we can do fine on the grant-related stuff. But I'm going to hand over to Dave for a bit because...
Okay. So what we're proposing as a format for the project is a design build. And there's a number of advantages to go that route. What would happen is you choose a contractor that you're comfortable with through the interview process and whatever meetings you have with them. And then we team up with somebody like Robert for the architectural side, and we define the scope of work, just as you would in a public bid process. But with the public bid process, you can have contractors making different interpretations based on the information they have, or maybe the information isn't as clear as it could be. But with the design build, the town of Guilford as the owner is involved in all the decision making and all the process from conception to completion. So you have input on all of the decisions that are made. You can also have an open book policy where you are able to see the actual cost of the project. And you're going to have one source liability and responsibility. So at the outset, it really isn't, the focus isn't on saving construction costs per se, but in the long run, you end up generally saving more money than a public bid in going that process. One of the things that isn't required with the design build is the architect, such as Robert, isn't required to create as many construction documents as you need to clarify the scope of the work to have an apples for apples bid. A couple of the other things are, you're going to get, with the design build, you're going to get the best value for your project. And it's going to be designed in the upfront process, pre-construction process. And as I said, the soft costs, such as architectural fees, goes way down. And in the long run, you typically will see a savings as opposed to a public bid. And along with the public bid, if the documents are unclear, then you're going to see change orders, and there can be conflict, and that will lead to change orders and additional costs. So it's a good format that it typically breeds a mutual respect and mutual trust between the owner and the builder, and in the end run, you come out with a project that you're proud of, and everybody's happy, and there's no hard feelings and less conflict. So that's some of the advantages to the design build.
And if we do it that way, they will be able to get the bids from the local subcontractors, and you'll be able to see how they compare to the other guys. It will be there in the open book ledger, as it were.
Yeah, as you're involved, as I said, in the decision making, say, for instance, let's just say painting. We'll solicit bids for painting. We'll try to get local bids on every aspect of the project, but we probably all know there's not going to be enough contractors in Guilford to do every part of the project. Mm-hmm. But you can see the numbers, and we can give you our recommendation, and you're involved in that process of making that decision and who's going to be involved.
Did you have a rough estimate of what needs to be done here?
We pulled some numbers out of absolute thin air. But
I'm actually
without,
not talking so much about the numbers right now as the, I mean, I'm interested in that too, but just as the priorities.
We have as much as anybody else who has been involved and has looked at it and gone through the place. We went through it with Peter and saw the different areas that needed attention, and talked about the Robert mentioned the new roof and the heating system. It's all still really undeveloped. We have a pretty good idea of what
Mhm.
needs to be done, it's just to refine it and identify all of those things.
With some of the things are obvious. You mentioned the handicap bathroom issue to us. Other things, well, I'm pretty sure that stair coming out of the attic and then you come into the room before you go outside is a fire code violation. But you haven't hired us, so I haven't read the code book to make sure yet.
Gabby, you seemed to nod when he said design build is a cost-efficient way to go.
Oh, I did not at all. I
Oh.
mean, in fact, I'm trying to sort of actually, Peter then pointed out that actually Stevens could potentially be a subcontractor for engineering, so I'm actually going to end up recusing myself, so that there's no appearance of impropriety,
Uh-huh.
since I'm employed by them.
Okay.
They're a good outfit.
Yeah.
We do quite a bit of work with them.
Well, in that case, because we have got your expertise
I just, you know,
question
I'll ask questions as a member of a public, but I'm definitely not going to engage in the decision-making process or voting.
Yeah. I also produced a few more versions of stuff about what I've done before, because as the conversation came through, it seemed that more things were relevant. So right now I'm missing a meeting at the Bridgewater School Reuse Committee because it was important to come here.
No, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
But let me just back up so that I'm clear. You feel, after looking at the building a couple times, having conversations with Peter and Dan's assessment, that you feel the investment that the town of Guilford is going to make in this site is better off with a design and build versus doing anything with this building. Is that pretty much the takeaway from what
Well, look, it would be to fix up this building, but procuring the construction services using the design build method.
Okay.
Right. We're not saying demolish it.
Okay.
It's
But your
it's
feeling is the
basically-
savings of money dealing through this process will save the town ultimately money.
It should save the town money ultimately, and what it will enable you to do is know what the budget's going to be much more accurately than preparing stuff and then putting it out for bid, whether invited bids or public bids. Because Dave will just be working with real numbers from the beginning.
Right. Fair.
And
I just wanted to.
And a low bid isn't always necessarily the best bid or your best option.
No, I agree.
That issue in the town of Wilmington not long ago was a low bid situation.
And we can, what we would produce is a GMP or guaranteed maximum price. And you're less likely in this format to see any change orders throughout the project. Now, there could be change orders for hidden items, so you open up a wall or a ceiling, anybody's gonna have that, no matter which format you use.
Right.
But as
How
far
does
as,
it minimize the change orders?
pardon?
How does it minimize the change order?
Well, you're not gonna have the, in a public bid, competitive bid, I spoke of the interpretation issue. And there are instances where contractors will interpret the documents in their favor to get their best number, even though something may not be clear. And then later on in the project, it's a possibility. It could say, well, that's not how we interpret it, or that's not how that reads. The intent of the work, this is what we interpreted the intent of the work. And we didn't figure to look at it. We didn't figure that to do it that way.
So your method, how does your method remediate that?
Because we develop the scope of the work, and we run the project, we manage the project with the scope of the work we developed, and it's clear what needs to be done. We've done all the interpretation.
Right. So,
we're all on the same page.
So you're not leaving the interpretation to the subcontractor?
No.
Right.
No.
I have a question about the living building challenge process. It's not something that we had considered for here.
No, we didn't think you had, but as...
But you feel it might be an option for this building?
I brought it along because I didn't know really what this presentation earlier on was about. If you were intending to adopt it town-wide, then we can do that.
Right, no, that would be way premature.
Yeah, this is a hypothesis.
As, I'm sorry, I've lost your name again. Emily. As Emily said, it is rather like the lead process. There's a lot of accounting for the performance of materials and so on that's involved, and so it starts adding administrative cost to a project for a very worthy result. But it is a challenge, so it's not to be taken on lightly.
Mm-hmm. And does it often result in more grant funding?
That might be a question for...
I think that's something to research.
Right.
But I think as a general, like 10,000 foot view, if you're going to do LEED, if you're going to do net zero, it's going to be much more expensive process.
Right.
Up front.
Net zero maybe not, because there's no prescribed rule book for that. You just have to say we're going to do it, but LEED and living building, yes.
Right. And you have this from the Living Building Challenge website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
No, I didn't, unfortunately, didn't print off a bunch of copies, but I'm going to leave you with these two documents. One is our interpretation and description of a design build process, and it might be helpful for you to read this. It's hard to explain all that in a short period of time.
Sure.
And then, so that's ours. And then this is one I just printed off of Wikipedia, which gives you another view of, or another interpretation of that process.
Okay. And that is different from what's in the proposal? Did you think?
I sent you a generic,
A one-stop procurement method?
Yeah, it's the same process. That is a generic
okay.
published description, but it's the all seasons document is the form of
the way
it just explains the process of the design build.
Yeah, it's the way that all seasons goes about actually doing it.
Right, maybe you could scan it and send it to us, Peter.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in that.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, you'll find it very interesting.
Thank you.
I think there's also good information. USDA Rural Development website has good information because they have very strict guidance about construction and construction management, and they go into their, I think it's a helpful thing if you're trying to figure out the difference between design build and, a bidding process with drawings, then.
USDA Construction Management?
No.
Rural Development.
Rural Development?
Yeah, for certain grants they require things to be bid out certain ways. So, for instance, up on the up on that list of projects I passed you out, somewhere on that, I think on the halfway down the first page, there's the pavilion at the camp.
Mm-hmm.
They decided to forego the USDA grant for the kitchen equipment that they could have got because being a voluntary organisation, a lot of their income was coming from donations, and they'd have to bid it, but if it's being donated, if half of it's being donated, then you can't bid it. So it didn't work for them. But it was the USDA grants can be given for items as well as for a project as a whole, and so that way it is possible to bid an item within a project and meet their rules.
All right. I think we've nailed it on the time again. Are there any other questions before?
So you two never would fight, right? Because
Pardon?
that's the whole point of the design. Is that correct?
In theory.
Yeah. I mean, it's, but basically, we're each trying to look out for you in the best way we can.
Well,
when it's a hard bid, particularly a public bid, the contractor is not necessarily fighting for anyone but themselves and their creditors. And so then I'm having to fight for you quite often against the contractor. But if we're all in a legal structure and a structure of agreement where we're all working on the same project as a team, that removes that adversarial, it removes the motive for
Right.
the adversarial atmosphere.
Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Lars,
Thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having us.
I know you have a long drive
Yeah.
ahead of you back to
And thank you
Plymouth.
for giving us your other meeting.
Yes, very much appreciate it. And we'll be in touch.
Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Peter, fuel contracts.
Yep, so this will just be brief. I don't have anything to report, but so I had been requested to investigate fuel contracts and get some quotes for diesel and heating fuel for the town. And noted a couple of things. One is that because these would be long-term contracts that the town would engage in, as well as that these would be purchases in excess of the $2,500 maximum, that the select board actually needs to make a motion for me to do this before I can just go and do it.
So these, by long-term, you mean a year, a contract to supply propane for the coming fuel
A
year?
year or yes, whatever, but either way, it's still considered a contract, which the select board needs to make a decision on as a group, that I can't just inquire about the contract without your pre-approval.
Oh, well, good to know.
So,
And
and the overall cost of such a thing.
So this, I mean, because we have a usual, like, we didn't do this last year.
That's correct.
So does this come up for a specific reason? Like, if we look at oil prices and say, oh, as a general matter, they went up? Or what can we,
The information that I have was that it was last investigated in 2015, but it was not, nothing was acted upon after it was looked into. So it came up from a couple of different places, and one of which is that Dan received a new contract for your diesel fuel, correct?
Diesel
and heating oil, yeah.
and did it change significantly?
Pardon?
Did it change significantly?
No,
It went up a little bit.
it went up a little bit. It goes with, like gas is going up now.
Right, right. So is it consistent with market rate?
Yeah. Of course, we don't pay tax on it, so it's always a little lower rate, so.
so I think that a little bit more history is that in 2015, the select board did agree to get quotes on fuel supply to all of the town buildings. And that process was never completed.
I actually thought it was because Dick wanted to switch suppliers so that we got bids.
But we also had conversations with the then town administrator about seeking other bids, or at the same time.
Because I thought actually Becky went out and got bids.
She did.
We got bids, yeah.
And then we never,
I thought we picked one.
I don't recall
Okay.
that we did, but.
I only recall because the person who Dick wanted to bid didn't bid. That's all I remember.
Right, but I don't know if we actually signed the contract, because I know that the bills were paid by different, the bills went to different entities as opposed to the town as a whole. Because the Historical Society would get a bill, and the town garage got their bill, and we didn't allocate it out, as far as I recall, among the different properties. So I think the question was, should we do it again? Should we look for a capped price or a fixed price for the year, for the different fuels, for the different buildings, and see if we can get a more favorable rate
Than what we have now?
than what we have, yeah. Than just the going market rate, which does vary.
I mean, what do we have? I don't imagine we have a lot. I guess is my,
Do we know what the annual numbers look like for both? If you're talking about combining the garage with the town building,
because it would
what we
be,
utilize
because
for.
we have kerosene or something
We do have kerosene.
here.
Right.
So it's not like we can be like, oh,
Right,
and
but
we
if-
don't even have much bulk. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like when,
So heating for the town budget is $3,000.
Then there's the
And then
library.
there's the,
library.
that's just, that says town budget, I don't know what the library is. And then,
I believe it's
it's $7,000 for the garage.
Yeah.
And that's your off-road, I mean,
Fuel
for the
oil.
trucks?
Fuel oil,
That's for heating.
That's for
That's
heating?
not for
But
diesel.
we didn't,
that's for
didn't
heat.
expend that much last year.
Yeah, I'm not looking at, I'm just looking at
What
the
are we
budget.
heating
figures.
other than the,
We
your
got,
main?
I have a waste oil out in the other back room. Plus we have a regular oil barrel for the heat and the slab. And that's what we got for heat. A waste oil and the regular oil.
But the waste oil, we don't, I mean, that comes in.
Waste oil,
right?
that's for oil out of
People
the
bring
trucks, and I
that,
got,
right.
right now I got plenty.
Right.
But I mean, like every other month, I'll have them cut my waste oil with regular heating oil, just to keep it so it burns clean.
Right. So the 7,000 is really the structure, excluding the slab,
Everything, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
the diesel fuel is different.
Right.
Diesel fuel, we usually budget around 30.
That's
No, I'm
for the
sorry,
vehicles.
diesel fuel is 50.
Right, that's for the trucks though.
Yeah.
Good. No,
So
no,
it
that's
seems
good.
like it could be a useful exercise to see if we can get some savings on $10,000+ worth of heating costs a year.
I mean, you're suggesting we do an RFP?
I'm suggesting that we outline the buildings that require heating, the types of heating that is required for each building, and identify 2-3 contractors to.
They have different fuels though. don't
Right, that's,
they?
yeah.
But there are.
So you need a contractor who
for each,
provides.
right,
Yeah.
All three.
and that's
All
what happened
three.
last time, is we had one for the oil, the number 2 heating oil, and then one for the kerosene, because they're different vendors.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the same vendor.
Yeah,
So,
and there may or may not be vendors that can do both.
But right now, we're just looking at a market. We don't have a contractual agreement with anyone. We just call on Monday, I need 100 gallons of fuel delivered.
No, they're
They're
They're both contracts.
So
Well, that's
We're on
right.
automatic.
Automatic delivery.
So when do the contracts end?
And-
Or is it, I mean, do you know what I'm saying, do they renew, or is it, when is the, I mean, if we're talking about doing a new contract, when does the old one end?
I don't know, because they were put in place before I got here.
I mean, 'cause-
so-
or can you break it in
I don't-
now?
If it's automatic delivery, it's whoever your fuel company is.
Yeah,
If
it's
you don't have a
yearly.
contract, you can just.
I mean,
call
for
and
like
say,
for the diesel and the fuel oil for
I
Dan,
think.
that was just they sent him a yearly contract.
Yeah, they sent me, it's a yearly.
And so it's up now, right, which makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's probably, the end of the month maybe.
I'm just
Yeah.
checking that we're not
Yeah.
contracting when we can't. And then, I mean, we could try, my personal opinion is that we don't have enough of anything for it to be a bulk purchase. Like when I managed the two, the cotton mill and the book press, we did early purchase in the summer based upon gas prices at the time, but, that's my personal opinion. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying, I think we should think about how we do it and how much time is involved and what we think the savings are gonna be, and what Peter has on his plate. That's it, if we think.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I use less than 1,000 gallons a year of propane. I get a fixed price. I saved 12 cents a gallon. So I think that's a nice little savings.
Yes, it is a good savings.
And I don't know if that's more or less than any building in this, in our, and if there was combined whatever propane or oil. So I think it's worth looking into to see.
And I think we have to do what does our procurement policy say?
Well, the totals are bigger
Then
than,
2,500,
Yeah,
so I think we need to
2,500,
go
so
out to
we-
bid our RFP.
we need to do an
We
RFP.
can't just call people, because I think that's against our policy.
Yeah, I think you're right. So do we want to, sorry, Steve, would you like to?
The poor man's version of an RFP is to simply go back to your contractor and say, we're trying to avoid going out for an RFP and everything else. Could you, now that you've had us for X number of years, what kind of discount can you give us on our current usage? As we go into remodeling the building and everything else, we're looking at everything. Is there something you could do better on the price, just to see if there's some possibility of it?
We could, but then I think we actually have to go out to bid. If we're gonna ask him, we have to ask everyone to be fair. and that's what our
We
policy
can't
says.
negotiate with our,
With our current
with our current vendor?
I think not if we're gonna go into a new contract.
So you're
Because we-
actually asking a very interesting question, because I don't know if we have a contract. I have never signed a fuel contract for any of the buildings in town, and
I bet it's not a contract.
It might not be, but then I
Probably
think,
just
you know,
automatic delivery.
if we're gonna call one person and say, then I think,
I think Peter, you still got the contract from the.
Yep, it's right here.
Yeah, go show it to him, that will maybe answer some questions.
Well, that is a contract then, right?
That's right here.
I mean, I think we need to be fair and either put it out to bid or negotiate behind the scenes, which I think is not consistent with our procurement. That's it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't suggest going behind the scenes if it's.
But that's what,
If it's
you
against
know.
the procurement policy.
This is number 2 fuel oil for $2.39 a gallon. No senior discount. For the town garage. And the total is over $3,800. And
Is that a signed contract or is it just?
it's just for the garage. It has not been signed by the town or Danny, I can see.
Has it been requested to be signed by?
Yes, it is. And
So-
it's dated June 2nd. So I think we have an obligation to go to bid for
so like, I mean,
fuel oil.
then we could do it every year, then we should do it every year. The
Yes.
other option according to our procurement policy is things like fuel, it might be cost savings if we don't have the town administrator spend all this time going out to bid every year. If we're happy with the service and we think the price is reasonable market rate. So I just think we should look at all options and figure out is 12 cents a gallon worth Peter's time.
And we've been using that company now for probably 10 years, 10, 12 years.
Have they historically been treating us fairly in your
Yeah.
mind when you look at the?
We used to burn bio in all the rigs.
Mm-hmm.
Then when one of the companies went out from it, they switched. They didn't want to commit one truck to it because they have to
Right.
flush their hoses out every time they
Right.
deliver it. So and then they didn't want to deliver diesel, so then we went to this company here.
I gotcha.
But we can say like, hey, for things that are between 2,500 and 10,000, I believe, say
15,000.
15,000, say, we're gonna use this, we don't have to rebid all the time. So that's an option too. And then depending on how we wanna allocate resources, that's it.
And I believe if you look back, probably in some of the old records, you'll find some old contracts where we got pricing.
So based on the, Gabby is correct. Based on the town's procurement of goods and services policy, it depends on partially depends on the cost of the purchase as to where it falls within that, whether it is considered a regular purchase or a major purchase. So between 2,500 and 15,000 is considered a regular purchase. Above 15,000 is considered a major purchase. So like the diesel fuel for Dan would be considered a major purchase, but all the kerosene
Right.
in number 2
Would be a regular purchase.
would be considered a regular purchase.
Easy.
So the process for each of those would be different. So if we were to consider it for the diesel fuel, it would require a formal RFP process according to the town's policy. The regular purchases, such as the kerosene in number 2, could be done either by a competitive solicitation or an RFP process. It requires a minimum of 2 vendors, preferably 3, and then at which point, if the select board so desires, you may select a single source vendor at that time, is what our policy states.
If we were to do so, I think the deadline for doing it for the fuel companies, the delivery companies, is August 31st. I don't know if you feel like you have time. I have no idea what savings we might realize versus the cost that it might take. But I think it is worth examining for 1 year to see whether there is some savings.
Now, for the heating oil, it'd be a solicitation, correct? It wouldn't have to,
Yeah,
or
a competitive
an RFP,
solicitation,
So could we
yeah.
just do it through solicitation? And that,
Mhm.
to me, is a call, and
Yeah.
this
Well,
is
I
what
would
we need.
Call 3 local companies and request them to email me quotes, is what that would be.
You're comfortable with that from the
Fine.
description
Yeah.
of the?
Yeah, so I mean, that is not gonna take a lot of
Right.
time, so.
No, I think that's worth doing, if we can do it.
And then from there, we might see what kind of leverage we have, you know, with, I mean, generally in the world of fuel, whether there's some leverage we have in getting lower prices.
So do I hear a motion?
I would make a motion requesting Peter to solicit 3 fuel vendors to see if we can improve our utilization of kerosene and number 2 fuel oil in the coming year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We
Did you
will,
abstain? Did you,
she aye.
yeah, okay.
We will table Miranda's report on the Hunger Council, and we will invite Steve Lemke to discuss river corridor bylaws.
Table 1 and to the table with the other.
And invite you to the table.
Miranda, are you out
Sorry,
there?
sorry, one quick question, because you said Danny's purchase was a major, so what do we have to do for that?
Diesel, the 50,000.
For the diesel, that
Has to-
It's in an RFP.
That has to be an RFP.
Okay, and we did that, or we're going to do that?
No, we didn't vote on that.
Right, that's what I want to bring up.
That is something that was not part of this discussion, but needs to be considered, because it is such a major.
I mean, to me, that's the
I
major.
thought that was the fuel
Yeah.
contract we were actually talking,
No.
We were talking
contract
about-
is not
Down here,
major.
just,
Is it number 2?
This is the number 2,
So
yes.
do you want to put it on next agenda?
I think Danny can just go get his RFPs, because that's the process that he's supposed to be following. I mean, for major purchases, right?
well, don't forget, you bought mine up to $15,000, so.
No, this is, your diesel fuel is $50,000, that's
Yes,
the
but
budget.
that's over the period of the whole year. With the diesel fuel,
It's not a contract?
no,
You just purchase it as needed.
that's just they deliver as needed. So,
I think we're okay.
some
Okay,
years we may go through that, depending on what the winter and mud season is like, some years we may not. So,
okay.
River corridor bylaw.
So you should have in front of you a document that says flood corridor bylaw issues and timeframe. So it's been about 5 weeks since we had a discussion about the bylaw, and the reason for that, to cast your mind back to that time, was that we were still dealing with the definition on perennial streams and what that would mean to the town as far as numbers of property owners who have a piece of property in that river corridor versus the special flood hazard area. So tonight I'm gonna tell you a couple of things that I've learned since our last discussion. And what I'd like to do is get an approval, not necessarily a motion, but just a general nod of the head as to what the time frame might be for moving this, continuing to kick this can down the road, all right? Good news and bad news to start with. There was some discussion among the select board about being nervous about being the reviewing committee for any variances or requests for variances that might come before us. Well, the good news is you can't even do it. What I've learned about this now, this is an amazing process, because as I keep asking questions, I learn more things from people who didn't know what I was asking in the first place, but now they do. So an interesting thing is that the select board, even though it was written into the regulation, the select board would be the reviewing body. You can't do that. It's not possible. But the bad news on that is that I came up with a thing that says in order to get the regulation in place, the town does have to have a development review board, at least for the floodplain administration, okay? And what I've since learned is it's probably a good idea for the town to have a development review board anyway, because there's a Vermont statute to that effect. So that, I think, is for a discussion for all of you to have at a future meeting. But before this, no matter where this is in the process, this can't go forward unless there's at least a floodplain development review board.
Is their major role to review variances?
It's entirely their role to review the variances.
That's all they do.
That's,
So they,
well, I mean, if
So
Property owners come before them.
Right,
and-
they can, the way the process works, there's a permit application, it comes to me, I approve it, it goes to an Agency of Natural Resources in the state, they approve what I've said, it comes back down here, I approve it or not, depending on what happens. I also have to send anything I don't approve to A&R so that they sign off on it. If a town's person or organization has a request for a variance, they would then take it to the Floodplain Development Review Board and say, we disagree because it's a historical structure, or it's not in the A&R mapping, or we think this is undue hardship. There are several reasons why somebody could come, but it's not like, oh, Jerry, nice to see you, you can have one, but Mary can't. It's obviously all on, and if I've done my job and A&R has done their job, it should be pretty clear that it is either within the realm of possibility or not, but the review board has to be able to meet and know that they are that, and they have to respond to that. And there's certain timeframes. If it's not done within 30 days, then either one thing happens or another thing happens. So it's orchestrated, but without a review board, none of it can happen.
Okay.
So that's the first thing for y'all to discuss at some point, either just related to this or broadly to Vermont Statute 24. Number two, the Wyndham Regional Council is now, our commission is now preparing a list of property owners with names and addresses. At one point, that number of properties was up to 600.
In Guilford.
In Guilford, with the definition of the street. It's probably more like 400 now, but I'm not standing on or behind that number right now. They're working through that. But when they're done, they will, what was 265 or whatever it was, 246 will probably be more like 400 properties because of the river corridor, expansion of that. But once I have the list of property owners and so forth, I'll share with you the number and share with you the list for that matter, because we're gonna have to mail to it at some point. If you decide based on that to go forward, then I suggest that sometime around late August, we have ready to go a postcard mailing to everybody who has a property in this proposed river corridor, which also includes, for the most part, the special flood hazard area as well. So those 246 people who are currently in there now, who may or may not know they're in there now, would get the postcard as well as any additionals that we would add. Obviously, I'd run the postcard copy and the design and things past you, and also I'd have to work with Peter and the town to say who will do the, who burdens the cost, or who bears the cost of the mailing and the design and the printing of it. It's not a big deal, but still have to print 500 postcards and send them out and get them back. And as you were saying, Gabby, how much time do we have for X, Y, and Z? So all of this is me saying, well, this would be good if we did it in late August and then we had a public meeting in September. But if that's not possible, then just add to that a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 6 months, whatever you're possible to do, because again, there's the time frames here are simply arbitrary. Although, we've done a lot of work on it to this point, it'd be good to get it to a point of yes or no. So I would still shoot for late August to maybe your August 28th meeting to say, yes, we've got the copy, which I would, circulate ahead of time or things. And then we'd say, okay, we're gonna do this mailing, we'll have a public meeting in mid to late September, or mid to late October, whatever it turns out to be. And then the possible attendees for a late September meeting would be myself, representatives from the Select Board, the Floodplain Review Board, Wyndham Regional Commission is committed to do it, the Agency of Natural Resources is committed to do it, the Planning Commission and Conservation Commission representatives were certainly willing to do it and wanted to know when before. We were gonna have this meeting in June, but we got waylaid by these issues.
And maybe the select board.
Pardon me?
And maybe the.
Yeah, I have. You're number 2 on this list,
sorry.
representatives
I
from the
see.
select board, right?
Yeah.
So, the bottom line is we have to work out the review board thing from this side and then finalize the copy on the regulation. So, what I'd like is a decision to proceed or abandon this plan, and then once we get to that point, you'll have the desire to, have the opportunity to proceed or abandon the entire bylaw.
Do you see any pros or cons of moving up as much as possible according to this proposed schedule, or taking longer?
I don't see don't see any reason to wait if there's no reason to wait, right? But, I know this process so far, that we'll circulate something and it will generate questions. I don't want, under any circumstance, to have the board or the public to feel pressured by an arbitrary time frame if they can't get their questions answered, or if you can't get your questions answered. And because my questions are your questions, vice versa. I don't want to be sitting here 10 months from now going, oh geez, I never thought of that. How did that happen? That's what I don't want,
And the bylaw is, I'm sorry, it's to expand the floodplain.
Well, right now we have a special flood hazard bylaw that's
Right.
already in place,
Yeah.
right?
Just
And
refresh
then
my memory,
to add the river corridor
That's
to it,
right.
which Agency of Natural Resources has done now. It's not just that would be a good idea. The emergency, the ERAF funding, to get the final 5% of the ERAF funding, you have to do this.
Right.
So if you don't do this,
But we don't have to do it.
You don't have to do it, but if there were to be $1 million or $2 million worth of damage, which I've heard has happened, with Irene, for example, it's pretty easy to leave $50 or $75 or $100,000 lying on the table because you didn't do this, right? If that's the real money side of it. But that totally ignores any reason to do it for public safety, personal safety, the river, all the other things. I mean, we're trying to keep people from building things really where they shouldn't be building them for these reasons. It's not just like, hey, it would be a nice idea if we didn't have to look at billboards. This is entirely different.
Right,
than that.
this is safety.
Right. This
Now,
is
the holdup at one point was the definition of the perennial streams.
That's
That's been
correct.
answered. What changed from your perspective?
Well, what
If
happened is
anything?
that it's now, the one that I believe they're going to stick with, and no less than this, is a perennial stream would drain a half mile or more watershed on its own, okay? And if you reduce that size of the watershed that it drains, it could be as much as your backyard and then be included. So A&R is still wrestling with this. I don't believe it will be any less than that, than a half mile of watershed drainage. Because they've already sort of wrestled that one to the mat.
Okay.
But it could go up more, and then, which would then reduce the number of people in the floodplain. Now, it also, I just want to say again that just because somebody's in the river corridor doesn't mean they can't develop the property. They just have to apply for a permit to
Develop
do it,
within,
and then they have to
right.
go within the reasonable accords of what it would take to do it. Which is a certain base flood elevation, certain grading that you have to have flow through of water if you're gonna put a garage there or something else. You can't have a basement with a bedroom in it,
Right.
and things like that in a place that's not recommended.
Put it on stilts.
Someone, yeah.
So Steve just mentioned to me this afternoon the business of the design review board, and the select board cannot take it up until the August 14th meeting, and we need to study this and.
Not design, development.
Development
Right.
Review Board, sorry. Can the select board undertake that process concurrently with your process?
Well, let me say this, you have to do that
I
concurrently, because not only is it a requirement, the town has been in the National Flood Insurance Program since 1986, and it's a requirement of NFIP. Okay,
yes,
so
we're in arrears.
Well, it's not so much you're in arrears.
But we should have one
Otherwise,
now.
I didn't hear too many people banging on the door saying, "Where's your review board?" But since we're raising these issues, it would be good to get current.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, the question was concurrently, or do we need to do it before you can proceed with your steps, your process?
You don't have to do it, but we can't write the bylaw until we can write the bylaw and say that if you decide that what you want to call the development review board, and if you want to restrict it to floodplain, but I don't think you can. I think you have to have a town development review board. It could be the planning commission.
Oh, we need a development review board to do that.
But if you're going to do that anyway, I would go back to Wyndham Regional and myself and say, let's redraft the regulation to say the DRB, and then if it doesn't come to that for some reason, it's just a matter of it's not able to be implemented.
But it wouldn't hold up your process, our working on that.
No. If you didn't ever do it, then you would be
in
difficulty, and this would not happen.
Right, understand that.
Did you review the statute at all? Does it say how many members have to be on?
It's a little interesting in some ways, and I think you'd be better discussing it all.
We don't want to talk about it tonight.
Because it's got different nuances, whether it's one or whether it's more.
Okay, so we have to put that on an agenda.
For the August 14th meeting, yes.
But it's not a fire drill. In other words, put it in a time when it makes sense and you have enough, if you wanna do a work session on it or something like that, I'm sure somebody from Wyndham Regional could join us and say, this is what you're looking at currently.
So do you want me to set up a work session for that, or do you want it to be at the select board meeting?
It's up to you, I'm just saying.
I'm asking them.
Yeah.
Can we have information on it first?
Yeah, I think we need to. I mean, Steve's given us some good references, and we can look at it and.
So you want me to get more information from
circulate?
Steve?
Yeah.
Well, or the statute, or whoever we need to talk. You need to talk.
We have
so
the statute now.
I'll get more information.
Great, that would be very helpful.
So, I think, did you pass one out to everybody?
Can't tell me, that's the
Okay.
statute, that one.
I have it electronically from Steve. Oh, here it is, I'm sorry.
That's a copy for everybody if you
Oh,
wanna
good.
pass it out.
Sorry.
now.
Oh.
And there's also an electronic copy that was sent to
Yeah.
Sheila if you'd rather see it.
You're on
I didn't
top
realize
of
I had all
it.
the
I will
He's
use
always
an
on top of
electronic
it.
copy too.
Sorry?
I will use an electronic copy to attach this
Okay.
to this.
And there's a 4460 on the second page, which if you wanna cast your attention to something, that would be where to look.
So Steve's question to the select board is, does this look like a reasonable sequence of events and timeline?
Yes, I think it does.
Let's start with that. I mean,
Yes.
Unless you say there's no way because we're all gonna be gone in the month of August.
Well, and also we may not get the development review board in place.
Yeah, so I think we should start with getting the copy done. Let's say this, before we decide when we're gonna mail, I think it would be wise to get the copy and the postcard done, because that's gonna be the same, no matter what happens. And then people can
Get
sign
mail
off on it and
with-
feel comfortable with it, and we can, Peter, I don't know if you and I would talk about the process for getting I don't know who does what to interface the mailing list with, this new mailing list. I don't know how much work has to be done to get that into someplace, so,
A little bit, not too much.
okay.
Great,
Well, thank you, Steve.
thanks.
Appreciate you still pulling the bull by its horns out of this.
Thank you for doing it.
I believe there are no discussion or updates tonight. Am I incorrect?
I guess these are communications.
Mr. Zambrowski? Would you like to
Oh, yeah.
discuss highway?
Yeah, I can.
Would you like to come up here as well?
He does. It's coming to the table.
I see the backhoe bids on the warrant.
Nope.
I just noticed that. So I don't know if we can discuss that or not.
All I have is general update on the agenda, so I think that's all we can discuss.
Because I do have the bids, Gordon and I opened them up today, went through them. Basically, that's that. I don't know if I can say who, what, or whatever, or is
I
it
think
under
we
old?
did, this is kind of old business,
Yeah,
because we
it's-
talked last
yeah.
week about you having this information this week.
Yeah, the
so-
last meeting, yeah, we did talk about it.
I mean, the last meeting, sorry.
If I remember correctly, I believe at that point, you also stated that you would provide this information during your general update, so I
Yep.
think that it qualifies for that.
Okay, well, Gordon and I, we got the bids in today, we sat down, went through them. We went around and tried out a John Deere, and we tried out a Cat. And the John Deere is the lowest one.
Lowest
but
price.
The lowest price, but the guys didn't feel comfortable in it. There was some sight vision problems, the hydraulics on it was real quick. Everybody leaned towards the Cat, which is more money. And I also spec'd a hammer, which is a hydraulic hammer that go around on some of the ditch lines to break up some rock and some ledge, and it'll work on some of the shalier rock and ledge, but not the real hard blue rock. But I think it'd be a worthwhile investment is to get one. If you want to see the prices, I got the prices all written down here.
You got two bids, not,
2 bids. All I did was Cat and John Deere. I weren't gonna mess with you. Same way when we go to do excavators, I ain't gonna deal with 15 different machines, because you're dealing with 15 different salesmen, and they're all nitpicking. And so I have 2 bids. It's the ones that we, wanted to try and go for there. So
so can you summarize the numbers?
yeah, I can give you the John Deere was $102,900. And for the hammer that they wanted to go on it was $17,200. So the John Deere price was $120,100.
And that is including a trade-in of our current machine.
Yeah, John Deere was going to give us $34,500 for a trade-in on our machine. The Cat is a little bit more. The Cat is $117, and with the, I'm not going to go. He gave me 3 different options on hammers. We're going to go with a mid-grade. The hammer, the other hammer he's got, the mid-grade one was $15,900. So the total for the Cat was $132,900.
Sorry, the first number again was,
$117,000 for the Cat,
and the deer, I'm sorry,
and the Deer was $102,900
Plus 17.
without a hammer?
without the hammer.
And they don't have a hammer?
No, they do. With the hammer, I'm adding the hammer. With the 120, 100s with the hammer.
The pricing just
Yeah.
came back for the machine plus this.
The
accessory.
hammer was an option.
That's all.
And they have leasing information in here. They got John Deere's 3-point interest. They do a 3, 4, 5-year lease. Cat does a 5, 7, 10, and their Cat is at 2.5%.
The difference before any hammer discussion was $21,000,
Right.
basically.
Well, no, 15,000.
Now it's 15.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
15,000.
When we first looked at it.
Because the Cat's the Cat's 117.
Right.
And the John Deere was 102,900.
And it was the Cat that the road crew in general
Everybody-
felt more
yeah,
comfortable
yeah,
with.
everybody
and in
felt
part
more-
that's because of visibility and safety.
Visibility and this hydraulics were a lot smoother on it, and they really liked it.
And I think one of the big things we've got to consider is, one, that's what they're used to. And while some of our staff is retiring, there still is a comfort zone, I think, a comfort level with any machine when you're familiar with it. So, and the hydraulics are a big piece of a machine, and the feel of them. And if Dan's guys came back and said, the Deere really was, it wasn't sensitive, it was jumpy.
And we have money in the budget for either one?
Yes.
We have
Yeah, it's in their capital.
set aside the
Capital.
capital fund. Sorry, the trade-in again was?
The trade-in that the Cat was gonna give us was $35,000.
So.
The John Deere was $34,500.
So is 132,900 net of the trade-in, or?
That's with the hammer.
With
I
the trade-in.
understand.
With the hammer.
With the trade-in. So it's really a $170,000 machine.
Yeah, the John Deere listed for 190. 195. Well, actually, if you want to, let me show you some figures here. So you.
They gave them list.
Yeah, I got all the breakdowns of what the machine is. I mean, that's for the John Deere, and this is a breakdown of what everything lists for. On it gives you the pricing on the whole 9 yards.
Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get too confused on.
There's no way I can absorb this.
Well, no.
No, I just want to show you some.
But
195.
That's the list price, and the
Here's
Cat.
what the
Cat must be more than
bottom figure right there on the.
Not necessarily.
Is what it figures. You got your.
So if I'm understanding, these prices are both with trade-in values,
Yes,
which are
yes,
fairly
yeah,
comparable to
yes.
the price of the machine, right?
Exactly.
So it's
So
120,100 with the add-on.
Yep.
Right.
For the John Deere.
For the John Deere.
That's the John Deere.
And the Cat is 132,900.
Correct.
Yeah.
With the
With a
trade-in,
comparable-
with
With a mid-size hammer.
With a
With a
hammer
comparable
inside.
hammer, I'm assuming.
Yes, exactly.
So
So,
there's
the
the-
net is $15,000.
There's the trade-in. What John Deere was going to give us $34,000.
Okay.
All right, and Cat's giving us.
And these are the prices with the trade-in.
Yeah, yes, it's all right there in the.
So I asked Dan if he would talk to our Cat dealer, since we're buying another Cat, if he would be more generous with our trade-in, but Dan
he-
tried, and he said these are as low as we can go.
He wouldn't be more generous with the list price, with the price of the machine.
I couldn't get him to budge on it.
No, he tried.
I
He
tried.
tried.
Is it better to go cash, or is it better to, the leasing terms again, or?
We'd have to
I mean, well,
You're paying interest.
You're paying
paying
interest on
interest
it.
2.5 to 3%.
If we have the budget.
Well, what I did is I looked through the cat, because cat off starts at 5, John Deere starts
5
at.
years, right?
Yeah, 5
Not
years.
5%, 5 years.
Yeah, it'd be 5 years, so you're looking, say, if you did a 5-year lease on a cat, or a 5-year lease on a John Deere, you're looking at about $6,600 in interest over that 5-year period.
And I don't know what the rate is on the account at the moment, but I believe it's considerably lower than
Yes.
Like a less than a percentage.
Less than 1%.
Like less than half a percent.
Go ahead.
So when we were looking at the cost of the state police versus the Windham County Sheriff, we had an hourly cost, and we had a cost comparison, and we knew what it was gonna cost us for each option, and what what the increase was over what we did, and we had kind of a spreadsheet laying all of this out, and I feel like that was only like a $7,000 charge. And here we're talking about 132 or 133, and we're kind of like pulling numbers out of air to understand it. I mean, not pulling numbers out of air, but there's nothing for us to look at that really compares this.
It's all right here. It's all right here on paper.
You could, for the most part, 90% of that could be put on a spreadsheet by line item to compare the two if you'd like to see the comparison.
We have it. We got a
I mean,
copy
I
of
feel
it.
like we're kind
The
of
machines
casual
are-
about 100 and something thousand, and
Well,
pretty
but we're
disciplined
talking
about 7.
What we're really talking about is $15,000 of difference. The machines are both
Not even. It's
will do
12
the
nine,
job.
that's
It's
different.
12
Yeah,
dollars.
there's
12.9.
there's $12,000.
Why do you think the cat is more expensive? Is it a better?
It's just a better machine.
The hydraulics. for
Everything's
instance?
all. I mean, it's.
Maybe that's why I
Of course,
don't
you're
know.
gonna pay. Of course, you're gonna pay for the name Cat anyway.
Right.
You're gonna pay for the name John
John
Deere.
Deere's a good
You
name,
know,
too.
so.
I mean,
But
I'm
CAD has a bigger name in the more industrial.
Yeah.
Instead, I mean, in the farm business, CAD doesn't have a name. You know, John Deere is.
John Deere's a big one.
And so, I mean, it depends on what segment you're also looking at
Right.
in construction. These bigger.
Is it
machines.
worth talking to other dealers in regard to
I'm
this
not gonna
advice?
do with a whole bunch of dealers because it gets to be stupid because these guys nitpick and they just if you want to deal with them, you can deal with them because I ain't gonna deal with them.
I hate buying cars
So
myself.
it's
so
I
the
mean
same-
it's
the
In
same
dealing
thing.
with the cat, there's a, you don't. I mean, you feel this one bid from this one cat dealer is as
It's-
good as it's gonna get.
well who you got? Milton Cat owns
I was
That's
gonna
what
say,
I'm
owns the whole
asking.
New
I
England
think one of the
territory. You
concerns
know.
is that I mean, to go to a different cat dealer, it's gonna cost more to truck the machine
Yeah.
than we're gonna save.
They don't like going out of their territory. That's like John Deere dealers. You got Nortrax is New England wide too.
So
And-
I mean,
I'm sorry.
personally, with our procurement policy, I think if there are no reasonable ones within a distance, which just having experienced this in the past, you can actually say, I couldn't get, the procurement policy is really to say, I tried, right? And even if you reached out to somebody and said we don't do it, that's a procurement, right? That's when you're 3. So if we want to we can call and say, tell them it's going to cost $15,000 for it to truck it up here, or that they won't do it.
And just to remind everyone, as I just pointed out in the discussion earlier tonight, the procurement policy states that it's a minimum of 2 required. 3 is preferred, but the minimum is 2. So Dan has met the minimum of the
Right.
procurement policy. So he's done what our policy states needs doing.
You sort of look for the machines you're going to get when you're going to get rid of them. You're going to get something for them. You don't want to go to an oddball machine where 10 years down the road
No trade in.
you're not going to get nothing.
Now, do these have warranties?
Oh yeah, all the warranties are all included in
And
the.
they're comparable.
Yep.
The basic warranty is the same.
If you
I
look at
think it's a
that,
5-year.
they're all 5-year,
so many
5,000 hours.
Yeah, 5,000 hours warranty.
And they stayed on that paper with no cost warranty. The only thing you have to pay after the first year's mileage,
Okay.
for them to travel.
And that's what we have now, right? Because that's what,
Yes.
right, with our other cat machines.
Yep.
I mean, I'm comfortable not having a spreadsheet because
So here's what I would ask for. For good order's sake, I would like the minutes to reflect whatever our decision is, but to say that the funds for purchasing this are coming from this account, which has this much in it, that we have set this aside, that we are purchasing X machine at this cost with this warranty, based on these criteria, and that this is what the select board agreed, because ideally, we would have a spreadsheet that did show the costs, and we would know where the funds were coming from, and we would be able to just look at it pretty easily, or had this information.
And if there's any questions about it, we have the answer.
Yes, so I would, at a minimum, like that information in the minutes.
Dan, and as far as waiting 2 weeks to have
It'll be,
this,
it'll,
does it?
far as what, we're getting it
No,
signed or
I mean,
whatever.
well, if we were to provide the select board with this document,
Yeah.
because all these other things, I don't have a sense of at all.
Well,
I know they're coming out of a specific
It's
account.
coming out of the
I know
capital.
we have money
the
in
capital
that account,
equipment.
but, you know, would it hurt you terribly to wait 2 weeks to have this resolved?
No, I mean, when
Or
we
the
were
town.
thinking about buying the excavator, we're gonna take it out of
Right.
our reserve funds, where that was gonna come from.
So
This
just-
is coming out of our capital equipment, our regular equipment purchases.
Right, and I just think that we need to have that.
It has to be
No,
documented, you're right.
I think that's
Oh,
a
it's
good
all
point, but that's why I'm
documented.
saying, can we wait 2 weeks to do it?
No, everything's all documented, I mean, you get the breakdown of the warranties and all the whole 9 yards right there. So, I mean, it's,
I'm not suggesting that we hold up the decision, I'm saying that the decision should reflect the
So you
funds,
do it in the
the
minutes,
totals,
okay. Right.
what impact it has on the fund, and the reasons for making the decision. So I would entertain
agree
a
with
motion
you.
that says all of that, but
We'll have to speak slowly so I can get it all done correctly.
Well, my only concern is, I don't know the accounts that this is coming out
Well, I
of.
think we could just say the account, and maybe Peter can, so
Oh,
I'll make
that-
and
go
Peter
ahead.
can fill in the actual,
capital.
code
Yeah.
from the chart of accounts. So I'll just make motion that we purchase the cat at, 132.9 total price, with the money to come from the highway capital fund. Ask Peter to include the number from the code from the chart of accounts, as well as the total we have in the fund currently. And that we chose the cat because, after getting our required bids, because of performance and safety superiority after testing.
thank you.
Second.
Do you need time to write more?
Yes, please.
And you guys have all the documents, I'll leave all this stuff
Yeah,
here.
would
so
you mind,
If somebody wants to read through it, I mean, it's no,
Do
you
we,
know.
question, do we
Just
have
make sure we get the right one.
a needs statement for why the town needs this new piece of equipment?
It's actually, we talked about this in the budget process, that you were hoping to do this next year, but
we were.
to get another year out of it.
We were gonna buy an excavator this year, which we were gonna take it out of our
Mm-hmm.
reserve fund. Well, I've been dumping a lot of money in this thing. And we were gonna try to stretch it for next year. And I don't feel comfortable with trying to stretch it for another year because I've been putting a lot of maintenance into it.
Yeah.
So I think now is the time to get rid of it, while it don't bleed us dry.
I think there should be a clear statement of that, of why the town is purchasing, just what Danny said, so that it's in the minutes or somewhere that we know we can track back to. Why did we make a $122,000 purchase?
Right,
$132,000.
we set up a capital plan about, I'm gonna say about 8 years ago, where we keep our equipment 10 years.
Right.
So it's in a rotation. We get rid of it, try to get rid of them at the 10-year cycle while you still get some money for them. Years ago, we used to run them in the ground. Your maintenance cost was, I mean, time we got done doing our repairs, you weren't putting nothing into your equipment replacement. So, I mean, that's why we try to get rid of them at 10 years and get some good money for them.
And this is something that Danny and I sat and worked on, this updating the capital
Cap-
plan. So we did it again this year.
So it is in
for the
there.
budget.
Yeah.
It's in the it's a part of the budget process.
Yeah. We may want to say someplace too what the trade-in value that we're getting for our piece of equipment to have that clear as well.
That's a good point.
Believe it or not, I was going through my last backhoe stuff, because I still have all that stuff in
Yeah.
the garage. We're getting the same amount of money for this machine as we did when we traded the other one,
Really?
but 10 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, of course, when we bought the one we got now, we paid $78,000 for it. That was after the trade, but I mean, the price of the equipment goes up. Of course, you're adding a pretty expensive item to it
Yeah.
with a hammer, so that's why the price is going up. I mean, but
There's so many times, when Dan mentioned the hammer to me, I thought it was a smart idea, because there are multiple uses, and particularly, with the ditching he's been doing. Even that rock came out on Carpenter Hill when we had that last go-around. They could have broken that thing up without, they got it done, but it wasn't safely. I mean, it was safely done, but I was nervous.
So, are we ready to vote?
Yes.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
I did.
Thank you, Gordon.
All in favor?
Aye.
I think we're done. Any other updates, Danny?
no, we're still grading roads and doing ditching. With all these rain, of course, last week we got another good rainstorm last Monday night, and we were out until I don't know what time it was. So just checking on roads, make sure everything's good. But other than that, we're gonna do some bridge guardrail, some fixing up on. We got 2 bridges down in Green River we're gonna work on, and just trying to get roads smooth up and trying to set some culverts here pretty quick. The weather straightens out a little. So basically, and the next meeting, I want to get my blacktop bids done. So I'll get that paperwork all out. So in the next meeting we can go through the blacktop bids.
Maybe a little in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm going to have it. So I mean, we'll do like I did today.
Okay.
To have them in by noon time. Somebody wants to sit down, we'll open them up and go through them. So at the meeting at nighttime, we don't have to be sitting there while looking through all these paperwork, so I can make a recommendation which company we want to go with, and like that's what I've done in the past. So
Thank you.
Good.
Right.
So, one thing, the Route 5 bridge is progressing amazingly. It was pretty cool to watch them move stuff on Friday afternoon, Friday day. They worked from 4 o'clock in the morning until after 8 o'clock at night on Friday, moving those things into place. It's pretty incredible. Don't leave, because I think we have some good news to share.
okay.
Warrants? Who's got them?
I'll make the motion to pay the following payroll and warrants. Payroll for the week ending July 16th, 2017, in the amount of $6,267.18. Payroll for the week ending 7/23/17, in the amount of $6,469.31. Expense warrant 02BC, in the amount of $300. Expense warrant 02CC, in the amount of $4,325.76. Expense warrant 1721, in the amount of $81,801.56, and expense warrant 02FW in the amount of $24.50, for a grand total of $99,188.31. There are some big ticket items because it's the new year, so like for our Seveds put in their invoice for their it's not social services, but their services agreement that was approved during town meeting. And there was, I think, Rescue Inc. for theirs, a quarterly for Wyndham Solid Waste, for example, so those were the big ticket items.
All budgeted items
Mhm.
that that hit us at the beginning of the year. Is there a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Richard. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for all those numbers, Gabby. Communications.
So I've gotten several communications. One is that we have officially received our reimbursement for the RERP grant. So all this money that we have been spending over the past 7 months for the Emergency Operations Center, we have finally received reimbursement. So for 100% of what we spent. So I thought everyone would be happy to know that we got some money back.
That's good, and it's also finally, I mean, it's like took a few weeks, right?
Yep,
Between submitting the,
it was actually very quick, and the people at the state were actually very helpful and cooperative during the process, so that made it much smoother. To that end, we also received the advance notice to proceed for the next year's grant, and you don't need to make an motion, but I do need a signature from someone acknowledging that you have received this and read it to return it to the state. So I'm guessing that would be
I can do that.
the select board chair. The other communication we received is I got notice from the Wyndham Regional Commission that the town was awarded the grant and aid grant that we applied for at the beginning of this month, just a couple weeks ago. And the award was actually bigger than we expected. We got $20,900, and these funds will be used for best management practices on hydrologically connected road segments.
Oh, yeah.
So Dan, we're gonna have to set up a meeting with Wyndham Regional for them to come out here to talk with us to make a plan of how to use these funds. As if you don't already have enough things to do this summer.
but that's $20,000.
It is $20,000 to hopefully help
Into-
you get some stuff done.
Cool.
That was the good news.
Yeah.
Yep, and so then
I mean, there's
last,
more work, but it's more dollars in.
but it's more money.
It's called job security.
That's
Yeah.
right. And last but not least, we have, the select board has received a letter from Bill Jewell, a resident in town, entitled Safety at Route 5 in Broadbrook Road. Hello select board, I've been attending meetings about the replacement on the Route 5 bridge. One of my items of concern is the access to Broadbrook Road. The angle of the intersection is not a good for access from Route 5 in northbound. While on my bike, I see glass and auto parts at this intersection. I think the problem is cars driving north cannot see vehicles entering Route 5 from Broadbrook. There's a bank and the intersection is lower than Route 5. It became clear to me that V-Trans was not going to do anything about this intersection. It makes sense since it is a town road. I would like to suggest to the select board the town make the intersection more of a right angle to Route 5, raising the access of the road, creating a flat landing area large enough to accommodate a vehicle without drifting backwards. This would need to be a new line item in the town budget. I'd be willing to come to the town office and talk more about this. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Bill Jewell. So it's no actions necessary at the time, but it's something for the select.
You know what that's gonna involve? Now would be the time to do it while they're working
Yeah, I
down
know.
there. Cause that means that whole thing is gonna have to be dug up. All the manhole structures are gonna have to
Sure.
be raised.
So maybe
That's not just a project you're gonna do
Overnight.
is this something that's a permanent concern, or is this because of the construction? It's always that way, right?
It's
So
always
been a
been.
concern.
Is
been-
it's
Okay.
bad, huh? From your perspective? or-
If you stay over near the guardrail, make the swing, you're fine.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're doing now since they've widened the bridge and how that's gonna, I think they cut the approach down a little bit, I'm not sure.
I think that's what they said. that
So
they-
it may be a little better now after they get that done, I'm not quite
So
sure.
why don't we see whether that makes an improvement?
Yeah,
Do we have, I haven't been involved in the Route 5 bridge, but do we have plans from V-Trans or that shows the?
They were very generic
yeah.
overhead drawings with nothing specific.
And does the town get as-built when they're done? What do you mean? We get as-built of the plans
We,
when they're done?
I think probably we may get a copy
I
of
don't know.
what's been done there. I mean, after all, we do have a sidewalk now we're gonna have to maintain.
That's right.
Even though it's a state road.
Yeah, no.
So, I don't think we can, so do you have a response to this, or a reaction to Bill's recommendation?
That road has been like that since I can remember. I mean, it's been a long time, and I really haven't seen that many accidents here over the years.
Yeah.
Maybe one. But the biggest thing is the speed when the people come down through, and
So maybe we can put this on the agenda for a later time.
Yeah.
I'm surprised
so that
that
we can have the
VTran
information.
didn't,
Because it
you
is
know,
getting late.
address this, if they thought it was a
Because
concern.
they have V-Trans on all them roads down there, or
Maybe additional
is
signage would
25
help?
feet from the edge.
Well, that's the thing. If we see how it's going to end up,
Yeah.
and then take it from and see
Right.
what would be entailed and change. I mean,
But I would
don't
think
it's
if
I think
it was
it's
a
discussion for
dangerous
later.
situation in their mind, they would have done something about it or recommended it.
I mean, the biggest thing is, I mean, it's, you got brush up the road, you just keep it mowed, we keep it mowed back and, you know, just, it's always been, the biggest thing you can't, like when I plow that with a big truck, I go down through, when I come back up, I don't go make the swing to head Route 5 south to go to Butternut Hill.
Yep.
I always pull up and then pull over in the Melody Lane and then make my turn and head down south.
So
Well, I'm glad
maybe,
Bill brought it to our
maybe you
attention.
thank Bill for his letter,
Sure.
and Danny will look into it and make some sort of recommendation
Yeah.
to the board, and we'll put it on the agenda for the 14th, which will be after the bridge is open again.
Yeah.
Speed signage coming.
Yeah.
Is there anything else before this?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I think I'm gonna get that one, dude.
Can I throw them in there with these, the prices for
And it is 8:36.
8:36. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.